I started with INROADS as a managing director, the first managing Hispanic director in Milwaukee in 1974. And in that position, I was responsible to help Frank start up the Milwaukee affiliate back in 1974. At that time, it was a different INROADS. We have no office. So the interview and the recruiting and everything that we did was out of my house. We interview the potential INROADS interns in my house. And from there, we asked companies, once we selected the potential interns, we asked the companies to let us use their classrooms to do the initial training for interviews with the companies. So we were a very poor, in quotes, poor organization because we didn't have any funds. And so it was a great experience because we had an opportunity to set up something from the ground up. In a way, we were social entrepreneurs that we did everything, one person operation, in this case, myself. We didn't have any funds to hire additional staff. Frank was a great mentor in helping me to be able to set up an organization from nothing. So if you have a chance to interview some of the INROADS interns in Milwaukee back in 1974, I think some of them will tell you that they came to my house and that's where they got the interview. So from there, Robert, we set up the office in Milwaukee. A few years later, I helped Frank to supervise the office in Chicago, and then helped Frank to set up an office in Pittsburgh. That's when I met Mort, and then after that, we set up an office in Minneapolis, St. Paul. So I was promoted to vice president at that time, and I guess I had probably one of the first the region one, which included Milwaukee, Chicago, Pittsburgh, and Minneapolis. We had a great mentor in Pittsburgh, Phil Smith. Phil was, at that point, the head of one of the largest companies in Pittsburgh, who really helped us tremendously to introduce INROADS to other senior executives, not only in Pittsburgh, but also in Minneapolis, St. Paul. There were probably a few times that he even flew to Minneapolis to travel with me to meet with some of his counterparts to introduce INROADS in Minneapolis. That was a great experience in the first 4 or 5 years with INROADS. And during that time, Reginald Dixon was the other vice president that eventually became the president of INROADS, who was expanding INROADS to Kansas City and to Nashville. So that was part of the initial experience in my early years with and then when Frank decided to retire, he asked me to return to INROADS because initially he gave me an assignment when I used to work for INROADS. It was a way of training me. That assignment was to do a research across the country. This was back in 1977, around that time, where the assignment was to do the research of looking at the biggest cities in the country. They had the largest Fortune 500 headquarters, as well as the largest foundations in those cities. So the intent eventually was to expand INROADS nationwide, but at that point it was only an idea. It was not a firm commitment until we start up developing cities like Minneapolis, Pittsburgh, and Kansas City, and Nashville. That was before 1980. I was fortunate that I was involved with that formation of what eventually became the National Board of Directors in Chicago. Since I was in charge of Chicago, the meetings were done in Chicago, and the concept of developing INROADS across the country was done probably around 79. I left INROADS in 1980, and when Frank decided to enter the priesthood, he asked me to return to INROADS with the purpose of moving me actually to Denver, Colorado, and use Denver as a springboard to develop INROADS affiliates in the West Coast as well as in the South. So we target cities eventually, and from Denver, I moved to or set up an office in Los Angeles, then San Francisco, San Diego, Phoenix, back to Texas, Austin, Louisiana, and Seattle. And the last two cities that I was involved with was Portland, Oklahoma City, and Mexico City. So Mexico City was the first office to outside of the US. And the intent was to expand the Hispanic population in INROADS. As you may know, INROADS was founded initially to serve the African American population. And as we got involved in cities, I think Frank had already the vision eventually, because I was hired as the first Hispanic managing director. And I think he had the vision eventually to include more Hispanics in INROADS. And so back in 1984, I was moved to Denver. So I spent on and off roughly about 24, 25 years with INROADS. When INROADS started back in 1970, one of the co-founders that helped Frank initiate INROADS was the founder of a company, an accounting company called Arthur Andersen. Mm-hmm. And his name was Leonard Spatchak. He was a great supporter of INROADS. And so in every city that we had in the US, we had a managing partner from Arthur Andersen and our boards. And so one of the people in Mexico City that I met with first was with the managing partner of Arthur Andersen. We had a managing partner of Price Waterhouse in Houston that was in our board, and he introduced me to his counterpart in Mexico City. Then we had a former INROADS board member from New Jersey who was Mexican-American, who was moved to Mexico City with a chemical company called Celanese, a German company. So I met with all three of them initially, and from there we developed the strategy and selecting the companies. And I had a board member in Chicago who knew personally the U.S. ambassador in Mexico, and so I asked him to introduce me to the U.S. ambassador to Mexico. And so we met with him and one of his associates that eventually he became, he was in Mexico, he was the director of economic development for the embassy. John Harris was his name. And eventually John became a board member in Mexico City. So with that group, we made the presentation. We formed a board of directors. One of the largest university probably in Latin America is the University of Mexico. It's called UNAM. The chancellor of the university decided also to join the board. And so that helped us to penetrate the academic community. And then with the business, we were able to penetrate that business community. Now, to your question, very interesting. Most of the top level executives in the American companies were either US citizens or were Cuban or Colombian descent. Wow. We eventually had a board member in the US who was the president of Kellogg in Mexico, who was Cuban. Yeah. And he became Secretary of Commerce for, I think it was under the Bush administration. He was moved, I think Kellogg has their headquarters in Lansing, Michigan. He was moved to the US and then became a board member in the US with INROADS. So we also found that the CEOs of the top level executives in Mexico City, that were educated outside of Mexico were much open to the concept of development, young people that executives that were educated in Mexico. The executives in Mexico City at that point were more close-minded in understanding that process of developing professionals than were American educated Mexican executives. And of course, the US executives were very open to the concept of developing the Mexican youth. This of INROADS was that back in the 70s, most of the college educated minorities were not in the field of business or engineering. So one of the purposes of INROADS was to divert the talent as early as possible in recruiting them initially as high school seniors entering the freshman year in college. And during the selection process, we look at their academic potential and we look at their leadership potential. Their academic potential, especially in the fields that we were interested, was mathematics, was science, was communication, English. In the leadership side, we look at their involvement, extracurricular activities, how they spend their free time, and then we put them through a process of competition for the opportunities that we had. We actually simulated the marketplace where for every position that we had open in a company, we will send 3 or 4 candidates to interview. And each company will interview 3 or 4 candidates. And then we allowed the marketplace decide where was the best fit. So when an intern got 2 or 3 offers from 2 or 3 different companies, then that's where we came in. And we coach the intern to make the best decision as to which company they should pick. But it was up to them to make the decision. When we recruited what we used to call the talent pool, we had an orientation process where we invited the potential interns and their parents. And we explained very clearly that only 50% or less of the people that we selected were going to become INROADS interns. And parents understood that very well. The interns understood that very well. Once they became an INROADS intern, there were 3 things, and I'm going to try to do a selling pitch to you.
Okay.
We asked 3 things to companies, and we offered 3 things in return. What we offered to corporations was the access to the best talent, the minority talent that we could find in the community. That because the purpose of INROADS initially was not only to provide summer jobs, was actually to provide an opportunity for the companies to develop their potential leaderships in the corporations. So we also ask them to make sure that they do the right job in selecting. Second, we ask for a mentor that will meet with the intern once per month, all year round, to coach the intern either during the summer internships or during the school year. And the third thing that we asked from corporation was the financial commitment, the sponsorship fee. And so those were the three things that we asked the company. The three things that we offered in return was the selection process of the best talent that we can find in the community. Second, we offer all year round coaching. And we did the coaching once per month on a one-to-one basis. We had no technology back then to be able to do that over the phone or over internet. So the staff will travel to the universities and will meet with every one of them on a one-to-one basis and help them to survive in the universities. In a way, we help the universities also retain the minority talent. So in many cities, we had in our boards the deans of the School of Engineering or the School of Business. So we got them involved. Here in Colorado, they will host breakfast meetings with the interns that were attending their faculties, and they will invite professors from their faculties to meet with those interns. So provide a good, on a one-to-one basis for an INROADS intern to meet the dean personally. I enjoy working for INROADS. It was, and it still is, my passion. I am still passionate about the concept. I still believe very strongly that the best way to distribute the wealth, and not only in this country, but any country in the world, is through education, the right education, the right help in mentoring talent, not only to hire people due to social demands or be a company that's trying to do good, but if they really wanted our society to have long-term impact, both in our communities as well as in the business community, both the business community and the minority community, they really need to get together and really develop a concept like INROADS.